Hey everybody, JMac here in the first of a series of videos on building my new SaaS product. I thought it'd be good to share not just the live code, but also product decisions as well as marketing for building a new SaaS. Far too often, developers jump straight into building stuff, and I think that's a bit of a mistake, right? You rarely should start with the code. And this really isn't necessarily like just developers. It's people in general, right? Like people, teams, companies, they just jump straight into building. And, I know as developers, when we have a new idea, like we start thinking, about the architecture or how we're going to build it. We get on like the AWS calculator and start thinking about, the network topology and like scaling out servers. And, we get excited maybe about the potential to use like a new tech stack to build it all in, right? And again, I definitely understand that this is a very like intoxicating thing, but it's also something that, it's honestly, it's a mistake. It's just not really where you should jump right in and start, right? So instead, what really should happen is, you need to start small and kind of start proving this idea incrementally. And so that's where I really want to start with kind of this first video is just, with the basics, right? Let's start at the very beginning. So what I have is basically, this initial SaaS product that I'm going to build. And I'm going to talk more about it in here in a second, but the importance of starting at the beginning really is to, again, prove this idea. Anybody can have an idea, but we need to prove that it's actually going to work. So for my own examples on past products, for example, would be something like Getting Git. Like Getting Git, I spoke at conferences to full audiences for years before I considered making this video course, right? If I hadn't spoken at multiple conferences to, multiple full audiences, I wouldn't have made this course. I would have had no reason to make this course. Like it would have just been a total shot in the dark. But going to those conferences and seeing developers after developers and getting feedback from them and having, almost 100 developers in some of these tutorials or some of these training sessions, like just really led me to believe that, hey, there's an idea here. And even after that, like I still kind of pushed this idea. I did online workshops. I did all sorts of things before building this. And honestly, even after I built this, I had the intention of making kind of a sub video course within Getting Git called Everyday Git. And I didn't really proceed with that because based on kind of the feedback that I got and based on the audience that this grew. Another example is the book Base Code. I recently released this book, but before writing it, I, again, spoke at conferences, right? I had this series of tweets that I did on Twitter about a year ago. I turned them all into like a moment later, but these tweets, relative to where I was at the time, I mean, they got increasing amounts of likes. I mean, some of these things, 200 retweets, 300 retweets, 500 likes. I mean, I don't have a very large Twitter audience necessarily, I mean, relatively speaking, and, even less at the time. And the fact that, like, these were doing, again, relative to me so well was continued proof beyond just the conference talks, beyond just anecdotal, coaching sessions with individual users. Like, this was proving that, hey, there was something out there. And so I took this a step farther and, set up a newsletter, right, where you should subscribe and so forth. And, this is actually something Justin Jackson, I think said, he said, look, if you set this up and, you don't get 500 subscribers, like, it's not a good idea, right? Maybe you should just move on to the next idea, and he kind of created some hard numbers around this. And more people say other things. Nathan Barry talks about the importance of, a landing page, growing your audience. Adam Wathan, really pushes this with all his products. And honestly, like, I totally firmly believe this. Base Code did a lot better than Getting Git, and I firmly believe that it was because of, again, this additional incremental proof. So this is very, very important to kind of start here with the basics. The interesting thing about this particular SaaS product is that I'm starting at almost a very, 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 very square zero. And I say that because a lot of the times, a lot of these products dealt with development, right? They dealt with Git, they dealt with writing code. And my audience that I currently have, is already kind of knows me maybe for some of these things, right? All the people that went to the conference training or, all the people that saw these tweets, I started to develop that audience, right? And so I kind of already had it there. And this shouldn't be discounted. I think, sometimes, you think, oh, well, this will be easy because, it's a great idea. And an audience, again, is so, so key. So it's something that shouldn't be discounted. And it's super, super important. And so the challenge for me, and I think for a lot of people, is I'm kind of starting from zero. I'm starting from no audience, in fact, with this, because this SaaS product is actually a little bit outside of what I think people know me for. But for me, it's kind of a natural evolution. And what it deals with is with investing. So almost for as long as I've been programming, 20 years, I've been investing in the stock market as well. I started at a very young age. And it's something that I've stuck with, year after year after year, and I've learned a lot about the stock market and investing in general because of that. And recently, I've gotten a little more advanced, and I started trading options in the past few years. And what I've noticed in this area is that it requires a lot more portfolio management. Options, stocks you buy and you hold, for several years, right? I mean, you could buy Google way back here, in 2015, and you double your money by now. And most people, their approach to the stock market is very similar, right? They just buy something and hold it. So there's not a lot of management that needs to happen with that portfolio. But with options trading, you're potentially buying multiple options, across multiple different prices, across multiple different months, and then you're managing those in a much more active way. Like you might be rolling those on a weekly or monthly basis. You might have different strategies that these options trades get turned into. It's a very, very dynamic process. And again, it's just a lot to track. And brokers, while obviously they track all of this, of course, their focus is more on trading. Their focus isn't necessarily on these tools. And I am part of other investment communities, and when kind of asking around and looking around inside of those communities, I found that most people, they just kind of have some homegrown solution like a spreadsheet or something. And so the point here is that there's definitely a gap there to fill here. And it gives me a perfect opportunity to marry up, my technical skill set to be able to build, such a tool with my investing skill set, which is, this is something I would use. And I think that's actually very, very important, right? I'm not just like going off and making up an idea just because there's a market need. Like I also believe in it. And I think that's very important. Like if you're not willing to eat your own dog food, if you're not willing to dog food or like use your own product, again, maybe it's just not a good idea. If nothing else, like, if you're not going to use it, how can you expect other people to use it? And if you're, as things get tough to grow this audience, to build this product, to launch this product, to support this product, like maybe your heart's not going to be in it if you're not someone who's using it. Maybe you're not going to make the right usability decisions, right? The experience, the product decisions. So I think that's another very critical piece is that I would use this myself. So not only is there potentially a need for this, right? I've identified a need, but it's also something I would use myself. And I think those are the best starting places, right? And so I'm starting to build this idea, right? But again, I haven't written any code yet, right? No lines of code. Like all I've done is pick a domain name. I think that's important. The only reason I do this is because it's super cheap, and I think giving a name to something helps. Worst case scenario, you can give this a code name, which, that's also fun. A lot of companies do that. They just code name a project and then they worry about the name later. It's not an area to necessarily get stuck in, but it was available, this optionality, .app. It's a couple bucks to buy the domain for a year just to have something out there. But more importantly, what I did was I created a separation between, my Twitter handle for myself, which is, again, mostly programming, and this new investment kind of audience that I'm going to try to build. Because, even though there is a bit of a crossover here, I don't want to just do a bunch of investing tweets mixed in with programming. I just felt like that would muddle the audiences. So I created this separate one again, just to start at square zero. I don't think you always have to do that, but because these are so different, even though there's let's say 100 people of crossover. Like there might be crossover here. I do know a lot of developers that are interested in investing. It doesn't necessarily mean they're options traders. And that's not necessarily to say optionality will only be exclusive for options trader. I don't know yet, you know. But the point is that it's a different audience. I want to separate it. And right now that audience is mostly developers. You know, I got Joe, I got Matt, I got Marcel, I got Eric. I know these guys. They're all developers. So I need to reach my true audience, my target audience, and again, those hardcore kind of investors. I need to start mixing the two. So while this is a great start, and I've started making like threaded tweets, and I'm getting some likes, and there's definitely some traction, and so again, these people are, to be fair, truly interested. They wouldn't be, traditionally speaking, my target audience. That wouldn't have been what I thought would be my target audience. This can't be my only audience. That's probably what's most important. So, how do you get more people? Well, I could keep tweeting, you know, all day long, but the hard fact is nobody knows who the hell Trader J Mac is. Like, they don't know what that has to do with optionality. They, you know, I could be tweeting tips and so forth, and all that's great, but again, I need to get outside of the Twitter sphere and make sure that, you know, I'm being able to grow this audience. And so again, the best way to do this on the internet is just more content. And so what I've decided to do is basically turn these threaded tweets into more and more, you know, substantial pieces of content that can be shared, you know, again, beyond just the isolation of Twitter. So what I'm going to do is turn these threaded tweets, just add a couple images to them, add a little bit more content, you know, add some charts, you know, obviously to kind of appeal to that investment audience, and something that makes a little more sense for a blog post. And I'm going to post those on Optionality, and then I'll cross-post them back to Medium. And so the goal here, again, is to grow the audience through content, and that's the best way to start. So no code, right? I'm not down here in my office cave, you know, for 7 weeks just coding blindly for this big bang launch. Like right now, my focus is to continue to prove this idea. I think it's a good idea. I might truly build it just for myself to use, but like, you know, I don't know if other people are going to use it. And right now, I don't even have other people to quote unquote talk to about using it. So I want to do some things that grow that audience so I can truly give it a fair shot at testing to see if it's, you know, a good idea. So I'm still in the idea testing stage. Again, I'm square zero. I'm not even square one. So I want to do that with building content. What I thought to use effectively is Jigsaw. And I did this for two reasons. So first of all, Jigsaw, for those that aren't familiar, is basically a static site generator, specifically a static site generator for Laravel developers. More on that in a second. But this is an MVP approach, in my opinion, to generating content. I could build a full site, I could, you know, whatever. But also, arguably, I don't have to build my own. You know, again, if we're doing the minimum viable thing, right? If we're kind of following that lean startup, incremental, testing out our idea, like I just want to keep doing the simplest thing possible that kind of proves it and gives me a reason to go on to the next thing. And setting up your own static site, whether Jigsaw or not, arguably isn't necessarily the simplest thing. If I want to post content on sites, I could just post content directly on these forums, right? These community forums. I could post directly on Medium. Well, that's true, and if I were all about just my end goal being posting content and building a name for myself, then yeah, who cares where I post it all? But that's not really my end goal. My end goal is to optimistically drive people to the product I'm going to build. So I want to drive them to optionality. And in order to do that, I want to make sure that that's the canonical, that's the true source, you know, that's the home for this content. I can cross-link from there all day long, so it's not much extra effort. I'm already writing the content anyways. What's the difference if I spend, you know, just a few more minutes to use a tool to set up to, you know, make sure that I'm the owner of that content. I have a nice organized place to do it. And again, I'm optimistically looking towards the future. I'm still doing something as simple as possible, you know, but not necessarily so simple that it's handicapping me from my, you know, it's short-sighted, right? Like, I want to do the simplest thing, but not so much that it takes me off the path towards my ultimate goal. Like, focus on your next goal or the immediate goal, which is growing the audience, but not to the point where I'm not paying attention to, hey, I'm trying to grow the audience for optionality, not just in general. So always have an eye towards the final goal, but also balance that with doing the simplest thing. on a technical MVP kind of perspective, I'm choosing Jigsaw over GitHub Pages or Jekyll or whatever else, which arguably at the moment I'm more familiar with, because Jigsaw, again, is forward-looking in the fact that I am, ultimately or mostly a PHP developer and, kind of underneath that, a Laravel developer. And so the fact that this is a static site generator for Laravel developers is perfect, because if I ultimately, or hopefully when I ultimately build Optionality, I'm going to likely use PHP and therefore likely Laravel to do so. So the fact that I'm not going to, again, have to rip out all this content and kind of inject it into this new thing that I'm potentially going to build, or duct tape it on in some weird way and have to support multiple different tech stacks or something, it keeps it all kind of, again, forward looking. Still MVP, I'm honoring MVP, I'm honoring the simple thing, but forward looking towards the ultimate goal. One last point about technical bits. A lot of people, again, they use the opportunity to pair a new idea with using a new technology. And I think that, again, is a mistake. Not only now do you have the challenge of kind of learning about your new idea and kind of building out your new idea, but now you have the challenge of building it out and learning a new technology as well. And it just makes things harder. And, building something out of thin air is already hard. And I've just learned multiple times that you really lower your probability for success if you pair that also with learning, new technology. So you want to go with what you know. I know PHP, I know Laravel, so hopefully Jigsaw is going to be the right thing. And I say hopefully because we are going to write some code. Again, it's not the app code. It's going to be some blog code, which help grow the user base. So let's run through Jigsaw's, just to kind of do a little bit of code in the last bit here. Let's run through Jigsaw's kind of installation, and again, see if this fits. If this doesn't fit my idea to kind of balance both worlds, to be MVP, but also be forward-looking towards, my project, towards the ultimate goal of potentially building this app in Laravel, then maybe I need to just use GitHub Pages. Maybe I need to just use Jekyll. So let's make sure everything works here. So going through their installation guide, it says create a project directory. All right, we can do that. So let me bump up the font size here just to make sure everything's good. So hopefully that's large enough. So let's we'll just call it blog.optionality.app. Again, I might end up putting this somewhere else later. Let's cd into that directory. And then, so we made it, we went in there. We're going to run composer require. So hopefully that won't take too long, but while it is running, next we're going to initialize our project. Good. So here's the directory structure. Let's take a look at this. We got source, assets, layout. So yeah, it looks much like kind of like your resource folder in a Laravel project. So that's pretty straightforward. Okay. Oh, looks like composer is done. Let's jump over here. Init. Okay, pretty straightforward. I guess that made some stuff. Yeah. Okay. So good. I see that source directory. So far, so good. Everything's running here. Well, okay, great. Let's just burn through this a little bit more. Again, if we can prove this out, then this is what I'm going to go with. The simplest thing, right? So, building and previewing. Okay, so this should run and make a build local. All right, let's run this. Build successful. Opened up Atom. Hey, look, I see the build local. Assets, index, hello world. Okay, it looks like it's building stuff. I'm not sure I totally understand the build local part, but again, I'm just on the second step of the doc, so no big deal. Previewing it. All right, let's see if it actually runs. Jekyll serve. Okay, seems to just be running a hello world. Look at that. Perfect. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty optimistic that Jigsaw is going to be just fine for this static site. Before I totally sign off on it, though, I'm not going to worry about browser sync. Let's just go a little bit farther. So I said I want to make these in Markdown, right? That's MVP. I'm used to it. I can write these on the fly. I don't have to, do all the HTML markup and whatnot. So let's actually see what it takes to make a quick post in Markdown. So it looks like they just kind of, similar to Jekyll, just have this like front matter type thing. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm obviously not going to draft a whole blog post in front of live code here, but let's jump in here. So I guess we can just make a new file. This is what you can do like in Jekyll. So we'll just say something like posts and my test post.md. And let's set that up so it extends layout master. Layout master is in here. And then it's supposed to yield section content. So looks like the default one they give you is called body. I think this probably needs to be changed to body. I'm going to try it out. So we should basically see a page underneath posts called my test post. And then we should see some awesome content within this. That's my expectation anyways. So let's rebuild this, serve it up again, click that. We still got hello world, awesome. And then I should be able to go to posts. My test post is what I called it. Hey, look at that. All right. Perfect. Okay, that was like one of the easiest I guess introductions that worked. That was a great success. All right, so let's check out build local. There it is, posts, my test posts of a static HTML file. So I would be able to basically deploy this build local out to my HTML, web directory out here on optionality.app, and now I've got a blog running. So great. Okay, so I think this is going to work. We'll just kind of stop there, but before I go, I want to point out the final last step for each incremental step that you're going to do. And the goal here again is to basically grow the audience. So what I need to do is, before I launch any of this and I write all this stuff out, I want to again make sure that I'm doing something systematically. I'm doing something very disciplined here. So what's my next goal, and what's my timeline going to be for this goal, right? Because I can't just have forever for this to kind of work out, right? Like, sure, if anybody's given a year to grow their audience, they could probably do it, but I want to make sure that I'm growing my audience by writing these posts and directing people back to optionality. So let's set up some measurable goals. That's important, right? They need to be measurable. So let's jump out here. I'm just going to make a few goals. Let me bump up that font size just in case. Okay, so we got some optionality goals. So the goal here is I want to, let's see, write weekly posts to cross-post on Medium and whatever else, let's see, investing, communities, etc., right? Communities, etc. And the measurement here is we could verify with traffic or claps or whatever they do on Medium. I think what's probably more important, actually, I think would be a good measurable goal is let's get syndicated on Medium. So within Medium, there's a lot of like investment communities and like kind of sub blogs. And a lot of times I know when I've written development posts on Medium, the more popular ones, I'll get an email from, Free Code Camp or whatever, and they say, hey, can we cross post this, within ours to our audience? And it's just like, yeah, do it. So that would be a good measurable goal, right? If not only am I writing these things, of course, that's easy to do. I can control that. But what I can't necessarily control is that growing the audience aspect. So I think this would be a good indicator that the content's good and I'm increasing my chances of growing the audience. To that point, I want to increase traffic because it's not just about Medium. I want to increase traffic to optionality.app, right? And I can measure that with Google Analytics. I can check referrals and so forth. So I want to set up Google Analytics on this blog. Again, measurable goal, and how can I measure it? I want to prove this all out, and I need to be able to kind of verify that. So Google Analytics is going to do that. And then ultimately, I want to increase my Twitter following because I want to try to have that be that place where I can speak directly to my audience for now because, I don't have this app built yet. There's no support. There's no emails of users that I can talk to directly. So I think Twitter is going to be that channel. And it's a little bit difficult to, again, pull hard numbers here. But let's just say that I want to see 250. That would be 150% increase to my current following, but I'd like to see 250 followers total, right? And now again, this is very arbitrary. This is a bit of a stretch goal. Hard numbers are difficult, especially when you're kind of proving something out. The point here, again, is to increase the Twitter following with some kind of like statistical significance. So right now I'm at what, 90, 98, 100? If I go to 105 after I do all this, like that's not good enough. But if I get to like 180, well, okay, that's proof, right? So I'm going to say 250. That's my stretch goal. Might not get there. And then finally, what's my timeline? My timeline here, let's say 4 weeks. So I'm going to write these posts for 4 weeks. I'm going to write 4 of them. If, those don't get, syndicated or used or clapped or something, it's some kind of measurable way to see that that's helping. If it's not sending people to Optionality to kind of see what it's all about, if it's not having people follow me on Twitter, then this isn't working. Timelines are important because, again, given an infinite amount of time, anything's possible. I'm trying to prove that this is a good idea, and I want to give myself enough time to see it play out. I also want to be mindful because it's kind of the holiday season right now, so people might not be focused on reading posts and whatnot as maybe they are at other times of the year. So there could be some seasonality that happens here. So I want to give myself enough time to prove it. I have enough content to write 4 posts. It's not a big deal. It doesn't take anything to set up Google Analytics. The followers, I already have the Twitter account. So again, the content's there. It's a very easy way for me to take that initial approach, that initial step. So I think this is, again, where you start. I'm not writing code just yet. I'm just kind of taking that MVP iterative approach. I'm not even making product decisions yet. I just kind of, honestly, I don't know what I have. I just have this raw idea, and I can sit here and think it's a good idea all day long. But if I don't have people that are liking, this kind of concept on Twitter, I don't have people that think this material is good, I don't have people that agree with me that this problem exists, then, I'm just not there yet. So, I want to start here. I want to see how this goes. I'll probably do another post to kind of check in, a second video really just to check in, but in order to give this enough time to play out, and again, with the holiday, might not do a video next week, but again, I probably will go ahead and start doing some other things that help achieve this goal. I think the next step would be an email sign-up list, but again, without more details about the product, again, we're just not there yet. So this is the very first step 0. Start growing your user base, start achieving the direction towards building this product, but not doing what you might think as a developer, which is, jumping straight into the code and coding this thing and doing some big bang launch. This is a long, drawn-out process that needs to be proved each incremental step of the way. So each incremental step needs to have some proof towards it. And so this is the first step, and this is going to be my my goal and my proofs all in one. So see y'all next time.